Why are millennials so annoying? From the moment they arrived, the millennial generation has seen its culture mocked and its problems derided.
This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I've led a very fortunate life.
On screen, millennials are often the butt of the joke, represented by characters with a litany of negative traits. Millennials are often portrayed as entitled, believing they're owed success and status without having really earned it.
Wait, I got passed over for a promotion again? What do I have to do? I've been here 8 weeks.
They have unrealistic ambitions, pursuing artsy, creative careers and entrepreneurial endeavors, but lacking the talent or focus to actually see them through.
Now, you're still right. Barely. Too busy living out moments you won't remember 5 years from now. I know this because you post about this life all the goddamn time.
They're seen as self-absorbed, selfie-snapping, social media-loving centers of their own universes.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Make sure you tell your friends to follow me and make me more powerful.
And they're also easily offended, quick to accuse others of microaggressions and too thin-skinned to take any criticism.
Honestly, Logan, I felt so misunderstood in class.
But it's notable that the rise of negative millennial stereotypes coincides with an increase of pop culture made by millennials.
There are certain people where you kind of make the calculation where you're like, you're probably going to be pissed if I write about this interaction we had, but I kind of don't care because my work is more important to me than knowing you.
Does the annoying millennial trope represent a backlash to their sudden ubiquity? Are these characters a form of self-aware criticism? Or do some of these ostensibly tiresome traits simply reflect the problems that millennials have been forced to live with in a world that seems to love to hate them?
I am beset upon at all times by a tsunami of complex thoughts and struggles, unceasingly aware of my own mortality.
Here's our take on the trope of the annoying millennial and why it may be time to reevaluate one of our culture's favorite scapegoats.
I give zero f***s about anything, yet I have a strong opinion about everything.
No word defines the millennial experience quite like privilege. The millennial generation, defined by the Pew Research Center as anyone born between 1981 and 1996, grew up with access to the internet, advanced technology, and better opportunities for education, giving them significant advantages over earlier generations. Yet they're often portrayed as taking these things for granted and acting like they deserve more.
Money, please.
Oh, no, there's no money.
Oh, my bad. No problem.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. I'll just destroy this office.
Oh, hey!
In his 2013 Time magazine cover story, The Me Generation, Joel Stein wrote, "Millennials got so many participation trophies growing up that a recent study shows that 40% believe they should be promoted every 2 years, regardless of performance." It's an attitude that has since been satirized, and some would argue embodied by shows like HBO's Girls, in which Lena Dunham's Hannah Horvath harbors dreams of becoming a famous writer, but chafes at the demeaning entry-level day jobs she has to work in the meantime.
Do you think that I think this is the best use of my literary voice and my myriad talents?
And we've seen it reflected in characters like The Office's Ryan Howard, who, despite being played by a Gen X actor, represents a distinctly millennial attitude toward work.
It's like, I could run GM, but I couldn't fix a car. It's not saying that one is better than the other.
Seriously? Because it sounds like one of those is better than the other.
On and off screen, millennials are regarded as aspirational, yet lazy, passionate, but unrealistic, and totally unwilling to shut up and pay their dues.
Adulthood is where dreams go to die. Grow up, get a job, become a drone, that's it.
In their most searing depictions, millennials go beyond annoying to downright villainous. They're seen as singularly obsessed with finding a shortcut to fame and fortune. Netflix's Girl Boss, a semi-autobiographical look at millennial entrepreneur Sophia Amoruso, celebrates the moxie and business savvy of this vintage clothing mogul.
This is an original 1970s East-West calfskin motorcycle jacket in perfect condition. Know what your shit's worth?
But it also doesn't shy away from showing how the protagonist leverages her privilege and builds her business by stepping on other people.
But I thought that you, as a friend, would want me, your friend, to be a part of Nasty Gal.
Everything you do could be done by an intern.
The millennial characters in Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring are also based on real people, privileged young women who have grown up obsessed with the lives of wealthy socialites and Instagram influencers.
I just have to graduate so I can go to FITM. Fashion Institute of Design. It's where all the Hills girls went.
Yet their privilege only leaves them wanting more, and they resort to stealing to get it.
Come on, let's go to Paris's. I want to rob.
And when they get caught, their privilege not only insulates them from consequence, in this world where attention is everything, it actually rewards them with the celebrity they've been seeking.
I want to lead a huge charity organization. I want to lead a country one day, for all I know.
A similar plot plays out on the fictional Search Party, whose millennial ensemble consists of entitled, status-obsessed narcissists.
She was always just like around, and she was, she was very jealous of me.
Their every action, no matter how altruistic, feels self-serving and fake.
We're making these designer water bottles, and for everyone that we sell in the States, we're actually going to give one to one of the African villages in need.
Their privilege is such that even when they commit murder, they're able to compartmentalize it, refusing to examine their own blinkered worldview.
Everything's gonna be okay. You know why? Because we're good people. We're good people.
Yes. Yes.
And eventually that privilege becomes a cudgel used against them by a prosecutor who's out to indict all annoying millennials for thinking only of themselves and for believing they don't have to play by the rules.
If we allow these two morally repugnant abusers of privilege off, well, you know what you're doing? You're letting an entire generation off.
This is a common criticism made by these annoying millennial satires.
You kids have been told you can do anything. You think everything is out there for you to have. It's not.
But then, who sets those rules? For most millennials, their greatest crime is simply not adhering to the career and life paths laid out by their earlier generations. Paths that, for the most part, have been denied to them anyway.
You deserve paid work.
I can't get paid work. I just graduated from Cornell with a business degree. That's the worst, Ivy.
Without a clear way forward, millennials feel entitled to experiment, to delay growing up, and to not settle. And you can see why other generations might resent them for it.
Hard to believe you're the future. Thank God I'll be dead.
Older generations have always written off the youth. Gen Xers may think millennials are lazy and entitled, but boomers also thought they were cynical slackers.
See, Gen X, mocha-sipping, chain-smoking little slackers need to learn the lesson.
If you ask the so-called silent generation, baby boomers were a bunch of freeloading hippies.
Would you mind telling me then what those 4 years of college were for? What was the point of all that hard work?
You got me.
Getting mocked and derided by your elders is one area where millennials are decidedly not special. But what is unique is that millennials seem to get it from all sides.
Black women aren't bitter. They're just tired of being expected to settle for less.
Her outfit settle for less.
The generational rift between millennials and Gen Xers already spawned its own sitcom in CBS's short-lived The Great Indoors, which cast Joel McHale as a sarcastic travel reporter placed in charge of a group of young millennial stereotypes.
I didn't know they allowed pets in the office now. Or is that one of those special dogs that weird people can take anywhere?
Oh, you're not allowed to ask if it's a emotional support animal.
Predictably, they're all social media obsessed, overly coddled, and unable to form meaningful real-world connections.
What if I told you there was a dating app that would allow you to meet actual human beings right now? A bar.
Ew. Is that for Android?
A similar dynamic underscores Noah Baumbach's While We're Young, where the 40-something filmmaker Josh, played by quintessential Gen Xer Ben Stiller, meets Jamie and Darby, a millennial couple portrayed by Adam Driver and Amanda Seyfried.
I'm gonna be totally honest with myself, I don't think I'm ever gonna die. I know that's crazy.
Jamie and Darby are hipster caricatures, from their fetishization of vinyl and VHS tapes to what they wear and eat.
It's an avocado and almond milk sorbet.
And while Josh's attempts to fit in are held up as ridiculous, Jamie especially is made out to be entitled, amoral, and fake. The clash between Gen X and Millennials is usually portrayed as one of authenticity and integrity.
If I hear a song I like or a story, it's mine. It's mine to use. It's everybody's.
No, it isn't. That's not sharing, Jamie. That's stealing.
That's old man talk.
For baby boomers, this generational rift takes the form of an all-encompassing disdain. The comedy horror Tone Deaf turns this generational battle into an all-out bloodbath, with the annoying millennial Olive pitted against the psychotic boomer Harvey.
It's nothing personal. It's not you. It's everything you represent.
The film clearly sympathizes with Olive. Harvey is a homicidal maniac, but it also makes her out to exemplify some of the worst aspects of millennial entitlement.
Can you at least let me go at the end of the week? It's almost free lunch Friday. I earned that meal. I deserve that meal.
It suggests that the contempt between millennials and baby boomers is one born of not just differences, but rage.
Getting drunk off your skinny girl margaritas. Cavorting around with your jobless, fedora-clad boyfriends.
Millennials have been around long enough that they're also taking flack from the next generation.
I personally don't want to be associated with people who still think that Harry Potter movies are a personality trait.
In shows like New Girl, we see how even millennials edging toward the end of their 20s find themselves increasingly socially obsolete in the eyes of kids just 10 years younger.
And they're the future of humanity. A pan-ethnic, pansexual hive mind. And they want nothing to do with me.
Jess's cutesy millennial demeanor is mocked by her younger, acerbic Gen Z students.
Your happiness seems like a mask.
And this echoes Gen Z's real-world attitude toward millennials, which regards them as both old and developmentally arrested. They're old people trying to use social media. As one Gen Zer told Vice, they try to fit in with the younger generation, but they're not really the younger generation anymore.
Well, at least the bully's not making fun of that kid anymore.
They're making fun of me.
Ellie Alves on You embodies this perspective. She's a precocious 15-year-old who sees through the artifice of millennial culture.
Feeds that aren't lame. Hope people understand you. But don't overshare like your breakfast.
The Los Angeles in the show's second season is immersed in insincere millennial nonsense and populated by entitled hustlers who are determined to speak their futures into existence rather than work for them.
I will make a film that premieres Sundance 2020 at the Eccles. Friday night slot, then goes on to sweep the Gothams.
The Gen Z Ellie deflates their ridiculousness with an old-school idea of authenticity that even Gen Xers would admire.
Celery juice? Oh, what is wrong with you?
This kid knows what's up.
So why do millennials get such a tough time from everyone? As with so many things about them, it goes back to the internet. Millennials came of age as the personal essay was becoming the standard for personal expression.
Let me just begin by saying that there are two sides to every story, and this is my side, the right one.
And this focus on mining themselves for content can explain why other generations find millennials especially annoying. Because their works are so personal, they're also often dismissed as shallow or navel-gazing.
But I think that I may be the voice of my generation.
With more avenues for content, we also just see and hear a lot more from millennials. It's little wonder that other generations feel like they've dominated the conversation, but behind their millennial urge to speak their truth, there are also valid reasons they feel so compelled to share it. While we often define generations according to years, it's arguably more helpful to define them by shared experiences. In the case of millennials, these experiences have been largely traumatic. According to millennial researcher Jason Dorsey, the dividing point between millennials and Gen Z is 9/11. In order for 9/11 to be a generation-defining moment, he said, you had to remember it, feel the emotion of it, and the uncertainty of what was going to happen next. And while that uncertainty was shared by everyone who lived through it, for millennials it was compounded by a financial crisis that struck just as many were graduating college, creating a stagnating job market that left their future looking exceptionally bleak.
And I know that a lot of you are concerned about your future, but there's no need to worry. The economy is booming, the job market is wide open. The planet is just fine.
These lingering traumas color 2018's Vox Lux, in which the life of a pop star played by Natalie Portman is marked by a series of defining millennial events, from a Columbine-like school shooting to 9/11 to a random terrorist attack in Croatia.
Celeste,
You need to get up and step away from the windows because in a few minutes there'll be an explosion.
Film programmer Ashley Clark has called Vox Lux a millennial origin story, showing us just how psychologically damaging it can be to grow up internalizing these ordeals while attempting to put on a happy face.
That's what I love about pop music. I don't want people to have to think too hard. I just want them to feel good.
In stories that truly engage with the millennial experience rather than simply mocking it, this unease underscores everything. The millennial terrorists in 2016's Nocturama seem at first like extreme parodies of woke young people, indiscriminately destroying everything just to upset the status quo.
Mais si tu veux aller encore plus loin, tu peux mettre que la civilisation apparaît comme la condition suffisante de la rupture de la civilisation.
Yet we gradually see how their dissatisfaction is a response to a world where disaster and violence is always imminent, lurking behind a veil of bland, pacifying consumerism.
Ça devait arriver, ça devait vraiment arriver. Ben voilà, ça y est.
Both Vox Lux and Nocturama deal with the idea of processing these fears through performance, whether that be through art, through dramatic acts, or simply through how we present ourselves. Performance can be seen as superficial, but through performance, millennials are often able to articulate a deeper, more impactful truth.
And when I tried to find the reason for my sadness and terror, all the solutions were trial and error.
On Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, performance means protagonist Rebecca Bunch literally bursting into song. Rebecca is a bit of a narcissist, and yes, a tad annoying. She does move across the country just to stalk her ex-boyfriend, after all.
I was in New York, I ran into Josh, he made me feel warm inside, like glitter was exploding inside me, then I moved here.
But the show also examines how this bubblegum facade is actually a cover for serious mental health issues.
It's called borderline personality disorder, and I read 2.5 sentences about it, and they were the worst sentences ever, and I don't want to know any more.
And when Rebecca finally hits rock bottom and attempts suicide, it's all the more compelling when contrasted against that performative fantasy. Millennial stories also grapple with just how much performance is involved in our everyday life, just to process the ambient anxiety of living. In Personal Shopper, Kristen Stewart's Maureen is sullen and impassive in her day-to-day of working as an assistant to a wealthy supermodel. Yet in her drawings and through her text messages, we get a glimpse of just how much inner darkness she's suppressing at all times.
My brother died here. My twin brother died in Paris.
A similar struggle takes place in HBO's I May Destroy You, where Michaela Cole's Arabella is sexually assaulted, while the series follows her attempt to minimize her experience and put it out of her mind.
I say, there are hungry children, there are hungry children, there are hungry children, to remind myself of the bigger picture.
These stories underscore the many transgressions that have just become normalized and the ways in which we've forced ourselves to ignore them.
Then he secretly took off the condom.
Like, that's so messed up.
There are actual Reddit forums where men share tips and tricks.
By bringing their raw interior lives to the surface, millennials are talking loudly and honestly about a lot of things we've long tried to suppress. It's understandable that some people would find that a little annoying. When we talk about the annoying millennial, we usually picture some privileged white character making themselves the center of attention.
Working feels bad, and I don't ever want to work one more day in my entire life. Oh my God, it feels so good to say that.
But in truth, millennials who create content out of their own lives have exposed us to a far greater diversity of voices and experiences. Aziz Ansari's Master of None may mine a lot of its laughs from observations about millennial dating, but it also confronts some rarely explored universal truths about race.
I did read somewhere that the people that do worst on the apps are Asian men and black women.
Well, it's great white people finally have an advantage somewhere.
Awkwafina is Nora from Queens presents a portrait of Arrested Development that's not dissimilar from the slackers of 2 generations ago, but it also offers a refreshing departure from the stereotypical Asian American stories of upward mobility.
You're too old for this. Come on, throw some of this stuff away.
No, not that one.
Can you at least throw away this bag of trash?
No, okay, fine.
There's also the radical body-positive joy of Shrill, which celebrates the thoroughly millennial attitude of loving yourself, both as an act of defiance and no big deal.
I've been letting people dismiss me or say shit to me about my body my entire life. And at this point, I just feel like them.
And Issa Rae's Insecure showcases what writer Yomi Adegoke calls the humdrum experiences that all Black millennial women go through, centering their stories while giving them dimension and relatability.
I don't want to be who y'all think I am. So don't be. How? You asking me?
In previous generations, these types of characters may have been reduced to stereotypes or tokenistic portrayals, their stories revolving around one-dimensional issues rather than their fully realized lives. But in millennial culture, they're allowed to be themselves. The good, bad, and yes, the annoying.
We cannot be in the same room without one of us making it completely and entirely about ourselves.
There's a phrase that goes, "The first one through the wall always gets bloody." Millennials are proof of this, trying to break down so many barriers at once only to get buried in the rubble of the structures built by those who came before.
If I'm sending mixed messages, it's because I don't know who I am. So how am I supposed to know what I want?
They may seem annoying now, but maybe future generations will thank them for it.
When Gilmore Girls first aired, Rory Gilmore was a unicorn. She was the rare teenage girl character who always had her nose in a book and was super close with her mom.
She's my best friend.
But this wasn't framed as uncool. It was aspirational.
I want to go to Harvard and study journalism and political science.
On your way to being
Christiane Amanpour.
It's safe to say that most who watched the original series imagined that after Rory's graduation from Yale, her arc would only continue its upward trajectory towards Rory becoming the next Amanpour. So it came as a surprise when, in 2016's Gilmore Girls revival, A Year in the Life, the young Miss Gilmore hadn't exactly become a raging success.
I have no job. I have no credit. I have no underwear.
Instead, she was a portrait of a faltering millennial.
The whole journalism thing didn't really pan out the way I hoped.
If you look closer though, the original series holds clues as to what went wrong for Rory. Everyone in Rory's life is constantly in awe of how smart and cultured she is.
Rory, you are tailor-made for Harvard. They're lucky to have you.
And as the show progresses, Rory seems to believe her own hype. She bristles whenever something doesn't come easy for her. She becomes increasingly entitled and arrogant.
So I spent a night in jail. Big deal. So did Martin Luther King.
Are you comparing yourself with Martin Luther King?
She's so convinced she's the main character in her story that she justifies some pretty dubious behavior, like having affairs with married and engaged men. Plus, for a person who prides herself on being an achiever, in her 30s, she displays a terrible work ethic.
Sorry, I just didn't have a pitch prepared.
That's a little weird. Thought you'd bring some ideas.
On closer inspection, Rory embodies a lot of the realities of millennial white privilege. But unlike some of her peers, she remains staunchly in denial of the fact that she's not a scrappy underdog.
Whether you like it or not, you're one of us. You went to prep school. You go to Yale. Your grandparents are building a whole damn astronomy building in your name.
Here's our take on what Rory's failures teach us about the importance of forging your own path and taking responsibility for your mistakes early on.
Stealing a boat is a pretty big deal.
I was upset.
About what?
About life.
Gilmore Girls is about a millennial's coming of age. Years before, the modern portrait of millennials would come to be defined through endless think pieces about avocado toast and the self-mocking humor of shows like Girls, Broad City, and Search Party.
Working feels bad and I don't ever want to work one more day in my entire life. Oh my god, it feels so good to say that.
As Tara Seatharam writes in The Atlantic, Rory's experiences mirrored or even foreshadowed what would become the defining challenges of her upper-middle-class fictional peers a decade later, from handling the privilege of choice to grappling with a false sense of entitlement.
This is all your fault, you know?
Why?
Because you told me I could do anything.
So what are these traits that millennials are supposed to embody? Inc.'s Bill Murphy Jr. breaks it down into a whopping 17 bad habits, but the ones that crop up again and again are entitlement, sensitivity to criticism, being out for themselves, and wanting to be entrepreneurial without actually understanding what it takes to get there. Rory's sense of entitlement is deep-rooted, a result of both her privileged background and the expectations put upon her.
Harvard.
Yeah, ever since she could crawl,
I really wanted her to go there.
A lot of the narrative about annoying millennials is really about white, upper-middle-class millennials.
Miss Rory Gilmore, may I present your building?
When Rory doesn't get an internship at the New York Times, her grandparents can't fathom a reason why she may not have been accepted.
This is preposterous. Who could be more qualified than you?
They were so confident she'd get the role that they already planned on buying her an apartment in the city.
Now we realize that the Upper East Side is not the most convenient address for an employee of the New York Times, but it's just a 20-minute cab ride to work.
Her grandparents also display a distinct lack of self-awareness by suggesting Rory's failure to land the role is down to nepotism.
I'm sure it's nepotism. If your name isn't Keller or Sulzberg, you may as well not even apply.
Conveniently forgetting their own nepotism in helping Rory get into both Chilton and Yale.
I thought I was helping my granddaughter get into what is, in my opinion, the best Ivy League school in America.
Meanwhile, down-to-earth Lorelai doesn't model this entitled attitude, but she has placed a lot of pressure on Rory by constantly underlining her daughter's specialness.
And if you see a teen walking around with a halo and a book, that's my daughter, Rory.
As much as Lorelai is framed as the unusual best friend mom, like many parents of millennials, she has centered her own life around cultivating her daughter's education and individual success.
Everything we worked for, all these years, her whole future. She was supposed to have more than me. She was supposed to have everything.
Gilmore Girls begins with Lorelai making the choice to do what's best for her daughter and tap into the source of privilege her parents represent.
I wasn't too proud to come here to you two begging for money for my kid's school, was I?
The first season centers on Rory entering private school and cultivating a relationship with her wealthy grandparents. And we watch her gradually develop into the person Emily and Richard wanted Lorelai to become. Hence Emily's blind panic after she finds out Rory and Dean spent the night at Miss Patty's.
She's gonna get pregnant.
No, she's not.
She's gonna ruin everything just like you ruined everything.
But who is this model young lady they want Rory to be really? It's someone who runs to them for help after she gets arrested for stealing a yacht.
She came to me, Lorelai. She told me what she wanted in her own words.
And goes behind her mom's back to get them to pay for her college tuition.
I need money.
You need money.
For Yale.
You need money for Yale.
Does your mother know you're here?
No. This is my thing.
Rory is caught between two ideals. Her self-reliant, hardworking mother who took a stand to make her own life.
You provide for yourself. You're not dependent on anyone.
And her extremely wealthy insider grandparents who can unlock doors to make Rory's goals more easily obtained.
This is the office of a very dear friend of mine. His name is Harris Fellows, and he just happens to be the dean of admissions.
In reality, while Rory likes the narrative and self-made credit of her mother's path, she often takes advantage of the privilege represented by her grandparents.
I mean, I'm a Gilmore. Do they know that?
But what makes all of this so toxic is her lack of awareness and unwillingness to view her own behavior honestly.
We take you in, we pay to redecorate a pool house so you can have a place all your own.
I did not ask you to do that.
You accepted it. You did not turn it down.
A notorious millennial trait that defines Rory is sensitivity to criticism.
He said I can't do it, so I can't do it.
When Lorelai tries to spin the New York Times setback as a learning experience,
most of the things you've gone for, you've gotten. This setback might help you have some perspective.
This isn't even really a criticism, but Rory clearly takes her mom's words that way and bristles.
And there is some paper out there that is gonna hire you as their future superstar. That's just a fact.
Yeah, right.
Just as she takes job rejections intensely personally.
I'm never gonna get a job anyway.
That's not true. You are gonna get a job.
I'm not. The New York Times doesn't want me.
It's worth remembering at this point that Rory's existential crisis comes after a mere 2 job rejections, one of which doesn't count because there was no job there in the first place.
I got a letter from the Chicago Sun-Times. They're not hiring.
Not to mention that Rory already turned down a job at the Providence Journal-Bulletin, presumably thinking she was destined for something better.
I even called the Providence Journal-Bulletin and begged for that job, but they already gave it to someone else, some non-idiot who didn't think they were too good and turned it down.
Recent numbers say that it takes job seekers over 100 or 200 applications to get a job offer, and often 10 to 20 applications to land even a single interview. Rory's refusal to adapt to or understand the wider context and her petulant response to not being immediately lauded by the top institutions in the country betray that her attitude has really always been more what would my grandparents do than what would my mom do.
I thought I was so in at the Times. I was just saying that I wasn't going to get it because I was trying to be humble, but I was so not humble.
Take the incident with the study tree. Another bizarre example of Rory's entitlement when she becomes irritated because someone else dares to sit by a tree she's claimed as her own.
This is my study tree.
The hell's a study tree?
The tree is plenty big enough for 2, even 3 people to sit around. But Rory eventually decides to throw money at the situation to get what she wants, which, unfortunately for Rory's personal growth, does work. This gets at Rory's main problem. It's not that she makes mistakes, which everyone does, but that she refuses to learn from them. It's this intractability that's the reason for her drifting aimlessly as a 30-something. She's just waiting for more opportunities to present themselves to her and more doors to magically open.
You basically promised me the job was mine. You were a candidate.
Looking back at Gilmore Girls, the extent to which everyone reveres young Rory can be a little mystifying.
She's a very impressive young lady.
I wholeheartedly concur.
She's a diligent student, but none of her accomplishments really set her apart.
Every child that applies has the same high grade point average, they've taken the same AP classes, and they're all on the student council.
It's hard not to be skeptical of how simply earning good grades gets her into so many Ivy League schools, or why she's elected editor of the Yale Daily News after she's just recently taken time off from Yale.
I did miss that semester, so seniority's a question.
We're past taking seniority into account.
Rory's best frenemy, the ultra-driven and extracurricular-obsessed Paris, behaves the way you'd expect Rory to behave if she were the hyperachiever we're told she is.
What the hell did Romain mean when he was going on about weeding out the hyper-intense in the interview process? He stopped just short of calling me by name. I'm losing it.
Paris does put in the work and arguably isn't rewarded for it enough.
How am I going to tell him I didn't get into Harvard? What am I going to do?
Lydia Venn writes that Paris should have been valedictorian over Rory. Quote, she worked her arse off for 4 years, got perfect grades, was president of the student council, editor of the newspaper, and on every committee going. What more did she need to do? Meanwhile, Rory kind of skates by on a mix of intelligence, privilege, general likability, and an easygoing veneer.
You're quiet. You say, excuse me, you look like little birds, help you get dressed in the morning. People don't fear you.
But the post-recession world of A Year in the Life seems to finally catch up to her, as Rory finds she's no longer rewarded for acting like she's above trying.
Don't get me wrong, I have ideas. Like? Stuff about the world, culture.
Rory has a pretty bad case of main character syndrome. She takes it for granted that both her grandparents' and mother's lives should revolve around her. She claims her mother's life experiences as her story.
You're 16, you're pregnant. You're packing up to leave Grandma's house. It's a riches to rags story. It's got everything.
And doesn't find it valid that Lorelai objects to having her intimate personal life shared in a book.
I don't want my mother finding out I left you in a bucket in a hardware store in chapter 6.
This is such an overreaction.
It's my life, Rory.
In Rory's friendships too, most of the focus is on Rory's problems and Rory's life.
I have to get to the bus stop. Dean's meeting me there.
But I'm trying to talk to you about this.
What good is it to have a best friend when she's never around and she never listens?
But perhaps this main character entitlement is most egregious in Rory's love life. Throughout the series, she treats men pretty shabbily and plays love interests against each other. She appears to view married and engaged men as fair game because if they're exes, she considers them mine, existing characters in her story.
He's not a married guy. He's Dean, my Dean.
He's not your Dean. He's Lindsay's Dean. You're the other woman.
When she sleeps with her first boyfriend, the now married Dean, she not only blames Dean's wife, Lindsay,
she's not good for him, okay? She lets him quit school and work himself to death,
but also doesn't respect Dean's adult life because it's not the one Rory imagined for him. Rory has always looked down on Dean for not being as academically inclined as she is, instead of accepting that he's just interested in different things. Step forward Jess, who does fit the prescribed Rory Gilmore mold of intelligence, in that he reads a lot of books.
You've read this before.
About 40 times.
But Rory still makes sure to keep Dean around while she's making up her mind. And she repeats this self-centered behavior of keeping her options on the table when she kisses Jess to get back at Logan. After rejecting Logan's proposal, in A Year in the Life, Rory is back to sleeping with him despite the fact that he's engaged.
Someone's coming to town.
Kind of.
Odette.
And she's dating Paul. While the joke is that Rory doesn't respect this person.
Oh, crap. Paul is here.
Why is Paul here?
I invited him for dinner, and I totally forgot.
Psychologist Stephanie Newman claims that one of the reasons women will sleep with married men is because they crave competition and a need for superiority, saying, feeling superior has less to do with the man in question and how desirable he is, and more to do with being more powerful than and superior to the other woman. The callous and confusing way that Rory treats the men in her life also reflects her signature millennial traits, like an emphasis on competition and fixation on the self. In Why Dating as a Millennial is So Screwed Up, Bold's Drea Rose writes that some of the generation's bad dating habits include: we ghost as a way to end things, we're in a competition of who can care the least, we expect a perfection that doesn't exist, we're overloaded with options, we're always stuck in a gray area, and we don't feel accountable for the pain we inflict on others.
Dean, you're my boyfriend. I would never do anything to hurt you.
Yeah? You're doing it right now.
Rory's self-centeredness may also stem from the fact that she's an only child. G. Stanley Hall, a child psychologist who first theorized the idea of only child syndrome, describes them as having a tendency to be selfish and hypersensitive to criticism.
I never realized how spoiled you were, Rory, but I guess that's to be expected. Only children are always spoiled.
All this speaks to a larger problem. Rory has to stop thinking of her relationships only as part of her story and start thinking more about how others feel.
It's my life.
It's our life.
Yeah, well, you write your side of it.
A Year in the Life starts with Rory aged 32, the same age Lorelai was at the beginning of the original series.
Hey, how old is your mom anyway? 32?
Lorelai was the teen mom who everyone thought had ruined her life. But in fact, she worked her way up at the Independence Inn and made a life for herself.
I worked my way up. I run the place now. I built a life on my own with no help from anyone.
Ironically, while Rory was supposed to be the golden girl, she's accomplished a lot less than her mom had at her age. This is in part because Rory has never had to struggle or take on the world alone. Rory's never been seriously tested, so she hasn't developed the resilient spirit her mom built up out of necessity as a young single mom. We've seen earlier signs of this missing resilience. In season 5, Logan's dad tells Rory he doesn't think she has what it takes to be a journalist.
I just don't think you really have the drive to put yourself out there, to be honest. To get a story, to dig.
And it sends her into such an existential tailspin, she drops out of Yale.
All I've been doing is working toward being a journalist. I'm not going to be a journalist, so what momentum am I losing exactly?
But even this doesn't turn into an opportunity for Rory to really better herself. Because rather than being made to fend for herself, she gets to live a cushy life in her grandparents' pool house.
Hosanna, draw Rory a bath, please. Hosanna has a pot of coffee for you in the other room. Interested?
Mm-hmm. Wow!
In her 30s, Rory is at last having the moment of reckoning that her mom had when she was just a teenager. She's no longer finding that the world bends to her will, and she's taking time to figure her life out.
I feel like this is my time to be rootless and just see where life takes me.
The show begins to view her more critically and less like the princess of Stars Hollow. But on the flip side, we can empathize with her more. The fact that Rory is so stuck in her early 30s is probably the most relatable she's ever been.
I'm blowing everything, my life, my career. I'm flailing and I don't have a plan or a list or a clue.
And now that life has at last gotten tough, it forces her to change, just as Lorelai did. A Year in the Life set up a full circle journey for Rory that is essentially about becoming her mother. Show creator Amy Sherman-Palladino has even said that the theme of the show takes after the opening song, Where You Lead.
Where you lead.
in that it's about history repeating itself and Rory following Lorelai's lead. Like Lorelai, Rory reveals she's about to become a single mother.
I'm pregnant.
And although it's never said explicitly, it seems like the father of the baby is Logan, the privileged immature heartthrob whom Sherman Palladino has compared to Rory's dad, Christopher. While the bombshell of her pregnancy would seem like an indication that Rory's hopes of professional success will be even more unlikely, the implication is that Rory will follow in her mom's footsteps in unlocking her resilience. Once she's at last tested, she'll show the world and herself what she's really got. Digging deep into her relationship with her mother is also the key to her deeper creativity as a writer.
I sat down and it just came out, flew out. It's like the story has just been sitting in my brain for years, taking up space.
And the cure to Rory's main character syndrome will no doubt be motherhood, which will force her to stop seeing the world as only revolving around her. A lot of Rory's problems as an adult can be put down to the fact that she was a gifted child. Many gifted children struggle to live up to their potential or feel enormous pressure later in life. They also often plan a career path too early.
You've known what you wanted to do with your life since you were 3. Be a journalist.
The National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented explains that if a career decision is made early due to cognitive maturation without synchronous emotional maturation, the gifted adolescent may not be able to consider the long-range planning, persistence, and self-sacrifice needed to achieve the intended career goal.
If I hire you, tell me what Rory Gilmore would write about for Sandy Says.
Oh, if I worked here.
Sell me.
Sell. Okay, we're selling.
Like many millennials and gifted young people, Rory needs to sit down and ask herself if the path she set out for herself at 16 is still the right one 16 years later. She's spent too long plowing on ahead. The privileged, entitled, spoiled millennial who assumes everything will work out for her. So it's good when, at last, it doesn't.
Moving home.
Gilmore Girls leaves us with a new definition of what counts as millennial success. Maybe career and relationship stuff isn't going to take off for Rory, at least not right now, but she still has a real shot at finding herself.
Hannah on Girls was widely deemed one of the most annoying TV characters of the 2010s, but was she just misunderstood? When Girls premiered in 2012, the show inspired a deluge of conversation. Critics raved about the show's portrayal of the murk of post-adolescence, how it made viewers uncomfortable while preferring a new, sharp, slightly bitter flavor of introspective female comedy, or how it honestly looked at serious topics TV rarely covered.
I don't really think you would understand any of my problems because you seem like you have a tremendous amount of willpower and general togetherness.
But a backlash soon grew. Mother Jones called Girls an unstoppably irritating show about an unsympathetic victim of first world problems. Perhaps the most controversial, hated, and misunderstood part of the buzz around Girls was star and creator Lena Dunham's main character, Hannah Horvath.
I have work, and then I have a dinner thing, and then I am busy trying to become who I am.
So why did Hannah strike such a nerve? Girls aired at a time when the figure of the annoying millennial was coming into our cultural consciousness. Hannah was a comic avatar of millennial haplessness. She was supposed to be the butt of the joke, but many missed that Girls was trying to explore these generational topics, often through being hard on Hannah. So why did the ultimate annoying millennial antihero inspire so much hate? And did her struggles end up being more weirdly relatable than most want to admit?
Why doesn't everyone struggling in New York move here and start the revolution?
It's the most infamous line in the entirety of Girls, and it comes in the very first episode.
But I think that I may be the voice of my generation, or at least a voice of a generation.
Early discussion of Girls frequently centered on this line, which was actually making fun of Hannah's inflated sense of self-importance. But many viewers interpret it in earnest as creator Lena Dunham herself claiming unsarcastically to be the voice of her generation and suggesting that Hannah's extremely minor problems were supposed to be riveting to the audience.
And I'm sort of now accepting like that's the line that's gonna follow me around till my grave.
And as the show went on, internet reactions to Hannah still wasted no time in assuming that Dunham was just as self herself involved or out of touch as her character. This misinterpretation fits into a larger trend, where art made by women is viewed as solely autobiographical. Girls premiered during an era rife with auteur-driven comedy series, in which the main writer and producer also starred, often as a thinly veiled version of themselves, in shows like Louie, Broad City, and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Congratulations on a great attempt at a chat and cut. Really good. 99 times out of 100, that's gonna work. Unfortunately, I happen to be on the line.
And to an extent, it made sense to see Girls as semi-autobiographical. Dunham has said she was writing in part about her experiences and herself, but it's crucial not to lose sight of the tone of Dunham's writing about herself. Girls was clearly a satire, which wrung comedy out of the awkward antics, entitled privilege, and self-absorption of the characters.
You know what? I haven't been offered a beverage, so I think I'm gonna get myself one.
If Hannah is a version of Dunham, she's a self-parody, constantly leaning into the most obnoxious parts of her identity. Many, if not most of the other characters are constantly pointing out Hannah's shortcomings in a way that often borders on cruel.
She's a lazy, entitled, manipulative, myopic narcissist who does a f of a lot less than she thinks she does.
And Hannah's issues with her body, her career, her sense of self are often treated as a joke when she articulates them, suggesting that it's ridiculous to care or feel sorry for herself as much as she does.
I am 13 pounds overweight and it has been awful for me my whole life!
As Grantland's Andy Greenwald wrote, one of the things that impresses about Dunham, both the actress and the writer, is how hard she is on herself.
No one could ever hate me as much as I hate myself, okay? So any mean thing someone's gonna think of to say about me, I've already said to me about me probably in the last half hour.
Yet, as Willa Paskin put it in Slate, this is at the heart of most misunderstandings about the show. The idea that in portraying selfish, grotesque, privileged behavior, the show is co-signing said behavior instead of lampooning it. A surprising number of interviews and articles even obsessed negatively about Dunham's nudity on the show. Instead of caring what the show was saying about the character's attitude to her body, they seemed shocked or offended by realistic scenes featuring a body that wasn't Hollywood thin. Girls wasn't trying to make you like its characters. Nonetheless, many people struggled with the show because of strong feelings of dislike for Hannah and the others.
Plus, you should feel very confident because I'm a lot better at this when I'm not in the middle of an obsessive-compulsive meltdown.
Much of this dislike for Hannah stemmed from audiences' disdain for Dunham herself, who's been mired in controversies throughout her career. The same failure to separate the creation from the creator was at work in how Girls played into millennial conversations. The show came to be the premier cultural example of the trope depicting millennials as fundamentally irritating, hypersensitive, and self-important.
I think I just feel how everyone feels, which is I have 3 or 4 really great folk albums in me.
But public perception of the show ignored that Dunham herself was a millennial, and that the comedy of Girls came from the writers introspecting and interrogating the failings of their own generation.
Am I seriously the only one of us who prides herself on being a truly authentic person?
Hannah was really a millennial anti-hero, one who embodied the flaws of her peers and encountered them in others. So, ironically, Hannah accidentally did become a voice of her generation, though not necessarily in the way the character would have wanted to.
Jeffrey, why don't we not workshop my apology? I think that takes us down a dangerous road, workshopping each other's emotions.
By the end of the series, Hannah herself wants to grow out of all of the most heavily caricatured aspects of her personality and escape the annoying millennial trope.
End of the day, that would just be me fulfilling all their expectations of me, and I would love to surprise someone sometime.
But the aspects of herself and her generation that she couldn't escape may be what ended up making her sneakily relatable. Like another iconic TV antihero, Hannah has lost the ability to live the life she was promised.
But lately, I'm getting the feeling that I came in at the end. The best is over.
Hannah is dealing with trying to build a life for herself in the wake of the financial crisis and slowly understanding that her dream of becoming a writer is just that, a dream. Instead, Hannah bounced around through a series of unfulfilling jobs and discovered that in the millennial economy, to quote the Washington Post's Alyssa Rosenberg, writing sponsored content and coming up with fake trends is the available destination for literary hopefuls.
Your whole story was just like a winky eye emoji followed by a poop emoji.
Outside of her career, Hannah has basically accepted that a traditional, picturesque family life isn't in the cards. In one infamous episode in the show's second season, Hannah spends a weekend with an attractive doctor played by Patrick Wilson, a plot seemingly designed to raise questions about standards of attractiveness and what people should want out of life.
Please don't tell anyone this, but I want to be happy.
The very idea of wanting to be happy is fundamentally embarrassing to Hannah, in part because she feels a normal, nice-looking life isn't possible for her.
You've got the fruit and the bowl and the fridge with the stuff.
I want what everyone wants.
And the tragic note the episode ends on is that Wilson's character abandons Hannah the morning after she confesses these feelings. He's evidently uninterested in fulfilling her hidden desires, thus confirming her fears that this life isn't available to her. Underneath all the off-putting aspects of Hannah, there's something about her losses and failures that are fundamentally relatable, as much as we might not want to admit it. Her self-loathing, body image issues, and sense of purposelessness are exaggerated, but they're still recognizable to plenty of viewers who may have had those same thoughts and struggled to find direction in their youth.
I'm planning to write an article that exposes all of my vulnerabilities to the entire internet.
When Hannah vocalizes everything that pops into her head, many of us have suffered in silence and may feel even more embarrassed to hear Hannah express our own insecurities out loud.
And I really care about you. And I don't want to anymore, because it feels too shitty for me.
However much they may have disliked her and not experienced her particular background, millions of people watching then and now have dealt with versions of the same problems, and Dunham managed to weave humor and pain together to give voice to this sense of loss. So perhaps what was most difficult to watch about Hannah was how many of us could relate to her at times, precisely when we didn't want to.
I just want someone who wants to hang out all the time and thinks I'm the best person in the world and wants to have sex with only me.
For most of girls, Hannah is just that, a girl who is unable to grow up. But the end of this series explores whether it will leave her as a woman through one of the biggest possible topics facing a young adult female, motherhood. Hannah's unexpected pregnancy at the end of the series became a stand-in for broader debates about what it meant to be a feminist woman, and how the constantly infantilized millennial woman would deal with getting older. Hannah decides to keep the baby, a decision she initially makes just to buck expectations coming from the same doctor she had a fling with back in the second season.
Makes you think I want an abortion.
This is an example of Hannah managing to surprise herself while still acting in character. Even if she isn't going to have a traditional family in the way she was raised to expect, she decides to create one in the same messy, impulsive way she's approached the rest of her life, and she accepts help from the flawed friends who have been the focus of the rest of the series.
I would like to help you raise your baby.
As the quintessential immature millennial, Hannah ends the series in some ways seeming different, like she's getting an adult life, and in some ways just acting like the same old chaotic, hasty, self-involved symbol of generational arrested development.
Because I made a very intense choice to take this on all by myself, okay? Mom, I buckle my bra every day, okay? But just do it for a second.
Critics were divided between those who thought the responsibility of pregnancy was an effective way to snap Hannah out of her extended post-adolescence, and those who thought it would have made more sense narratively for her to get an abortion. But there wasn't necessarily a right answer for Hannah, or for anyone in her position, and it makes sense that in many respects she remains the same person, even as she gets older and undergoes a dramatic life change. Hannah's millennial anxieties and insecurities come back, but transition to being about parenting, foreshadowing today's cultural focus on the elder millennial and what kind of parents millennials are turning out to be.
I'm a quitter. So what if that's the kind of man that I raise? What if that's the only kind of man I can raise?
By bonding with her own mother over their shared experience of parenting, Hannah discovers that there are some timeless things that you can only feel through connection, getting outside of yourself and going along to whatever surprising places your life's journey takes you.
This is your baby.
This is my baby.
In the end, Dunham suggests that Hannah's issues aren't just generational, they're human.
I don't understand why you're yelling at me when I'm in emotional pain.
Yeah, well, you know who else is in emotional pain?
Who?
Fucking everyone!
Ultimately, Hannah Horvath isn't Lena Dunham. Instead, she functions as a funhouse mirror that reflects and exaggerates fundamentally relatable human problems.
Letting go doesn't come very naturally to me.
10 years after Girls first premiered, it's not hard to see Hannah's wherever you look. The economy is even more precarious and mental health issues are at all-time highs, especially with young people. But Hannah also provides hope to find a way out of those issues through her family. The culture might want to forget about Girls, but Hannah is still with us.
Every reality show needs a villain, and within the faux documentary that is The Office, Ryan Howard fits that bill.
If you have something bad to say to me, Pam, say it to my face.
I don't think you're a very good person. And forgive me, but I feel like I've said this to you before. I don't like you very much.
Like all the best reality show heels,
you know, I'm not here to make friends.
Ryan is arrogant and manipulative. He suffers from delusions of grandeur, yet he's incredibly lazy.
I could run GM, but I couldn't fix a car. It's not saying that one is better than the other.
Entitled Lacking Work Ethic, Unable to Cope with the Real World, many of Ryan's character faults are the same that have been leveled against the entire generation known as Millennials. If we estimate that Ryan is between 22 and 24 when The Office begins in 2005, given that he's in grad school probably a year or two out of a 4-year university, and working an entry-level temp job, this would make him on the older end of the millennial spectrum. And The Office uses Ryan as a stand-in for the many 20-somethings who joined the job market starting in the 2000s, where they quickly earned a reputation for being both incompetent and immature.
I quit. This job is different than I thought it would be.
Stop. Does this situation look familiar? A new type of worker has entered the workforce. They're called Millennials, and they're terrible.
While Ryan eventually became an evil millennial punchline,
I'm such a perfectionist that I'd kind of rather not do it at all than do a crappy version.
he wasn't always like this. Ryan started out as a bright, motivated guy with a dream for a bigger life.
I don't want to be like a guy here, you know? Like Stanley is the crossword puzzle guy, and Angela has cats. I don't want to be the something guy.
In fact, from a certain point of view, Ryan's transformation from humble young go-getter into hipster joke is less comedy than drama, an unfortunate fall from grace illustrating the pitfalls of the generation he's meant to represent. Here's our take on how The Office's Ryan Howard is the quintessential millennial tragedy.
Ryan has never made a sale. And he started a fire trying to make a cheesy pita.
Like beatniks, hippies, punks, and slackers before them, the millennial has become one of TV's favorite targets.
Wait, I got passed over for a promotion again? What do I have to do? I've been here 8 weeks.
After all, every generation loves looking down on those darn kids who all think the world revolves around them.
Maybe part of it's the fact that you're in a hurry. You've grown up on instant orange juice. Flip a dial, instant entertainment. Dial 7 digits, instant communication.
But millennials in particular have come to be defined in popular culture by their inflated sense of entitlement.
I think that I may be the voice of my generation, or at least a voice of a generation.
Combined with the lack of any real work ethic.
Everyone wants to be rich, but nobody wants to work for it.
Came in at 10:30 today, right?
Ryan embodies all the worst stereotypes about millennials. He doesn't bother to connect with others, he's a flake.
Okay, I don't like committing to things just like that.
And he believes that he deserves exceptional success, but his self-sabotaging behavior usually gets in the way.
Hell yeah. I'll look it up.
Hi, wow, that's dangerous.
So what went wrong to make him like this?
I want guidance. I want leadership. But don't just like boss me around, you know? Like lead me. Lead me when I'm in the mood to be led.
Like many millennials, Ryan appears to be damaged by 3 key factors. 1, a hostile work environment. 2, a shallow image-obsessed culture. And 3, overindulgent parenting. Let's start with the work environment. When we first meet Ryan, he seems willing, even eager to start at the bottom.
Ryan, Howard from the temp agency. Daniqua sent me down to start today.
Far from being averse to hard work, Ryan, or the temp as his coworkers call him,
Okay, temp.
attends business school at night while working at Dunder Mifflin during the day. And although he harbors some typically grand career aspirations,
what I want is to own my own company. That is ridiculous.
he also seems to know he has a long way to go before achieving them, even if he's already one step ahead of his boss.
Market fragments, what is that supposed to be?
It's a way of looking at consumers as subsets of a larger client base.
You're so effing smart. You should be teaching me.
But this clearly intelligent, driven, and resourceful young man gradually realizes he's entered a disappointing professional world that offers him few opportunities for meaningful advancement. This echoes the experience of graduating millennials who found themselves in a job market plagued by widespread layoffs and recession fears, and corporations run by an older generation that's resistant to change.
Dunder Mifflin can't compete with the modern chains, and management is unwilling or unable to adapt.
What Ryan needs more than anything is a leader, someone who can educate and inspire him. Unfortunately, he gets Michael Scott.
You need to play to win, but you also have to win to play.
Got it.
Along with not having any real wisdom to impart, Michael abuses their employer-employee relationship, frequently forcing Ryan to do demeaning work and treating him as a personal servant.
Here, Ryan. Oh, he needs to lift me. And he needs to clean me up a little bit. Bring a wet towel.
Worse, Michael objectifies Ryan, making frequent inappropriate comments that, in any normal workplace, would probably lead to a lawsuit.
You, my friend, would be the belle of the ball. Don't drop the soap. Don't drop the soap.
Michael, please.
Ryan's attempts to find a mentor among his other co-workers prove similarly futile.
What is the greatest danger facing Dunder Mifflin?
Outsourcing and consolidation of competition.
Wrong. Flash floods.
Baby boomers like to criticize millennials for being too self-absorbed, but this microcosm of the work environment illustrates how those same boomers have failed to realize the example they're setting, or consistently mentor young millennial workers.
You know what? We could get this done a lot quicker if we formed a type of assembly line.
This here is a run out the clock situation, just like upstairs.
This lack of guidance and support means that when Ryan tries his best but still comes up short, he doesn't have the necessary skills or resilience to cope with the setback.
I don't get it. I don't get what I did wrong.
Not everything's a lesson, Ryan. Sometimes you just fail.
For the first 3 seasons of The Office, smart, ambitious, thwarted Ryan inspires our empathy. He's a surrogate for anyone who's ever had their spirits crushed by corporate life.
If I had to, I could clean out my desk in 5 seconds. And nobody would ever know I had ever been here. And I'd forget too.
I liked you better as the temp.
Me too.
When Ryan is granted a surprise promotion to vice president, at first it feels like justice, a revenge fantasy for anyone who's felt underestimated or exploited.
We're all very excited you're going to be joining us. It'll be nice to have another MBA around here.
I'm excited too.
But it doesn't take long for Ryan to become a textbook portrait of the worst possible boss. As his newfound success goes to his head, his once measured and justified belief in himself turns into outright egomania.
People keep calling me a wonderkind. I don't even know what that means. I mean, I know what it means. It means very successful for your age.
It quickly becomes clear that Ryan views his new role as something he deserves, regardless of whether he's actually earned it. And his idea of succeeding in this job has far less to do with his vision for the company than his own personal glory.
Ryan sees himself as the next, mega mogul type, and he sees this paper company as just one step towards becoming that. So he'll tear the company apart to raise revenue 1%.
Because Ryan was in such a hurry to skip a few steps on his way to the top, he hasn't had time to build empathy or respect for the colleagues he stepped over, or cultivate the people skills that are a key part of being a manager.
This company is getting younger, faster, more efficient. You need to prepare yourself.
After years of feeling disrespected or ridiculed as the temp, Ryan relishes wielding power over his former superiors.
I need to give you a formal warning about your job performance.
A formal warning?
It's actually not a joke. I know how you spend your time here, and I know how little you care about your job.
Without having any real grounding in the business he's now running, after all, he's never even made a sale, Ryan is in over his head. To cover for his many shortcomings, he resorts to chasing trends and spouting empty corporate buzzwords.
Convergence, viral marketing. We're going guerrilla. We're taking it to the streets while keeping an eye on the street. Wall Street.
And while his idea for a new company website is actually a pretty solid one, Ryan needlessly complicates his simple plan with unnecessary value adds, desperately attempting to make Dunder Mifflin into the kind of hip brand that would match his own inflated self-image. Instead of channeling any of that original creativity or intelligence we know he does possess, Ryan parrots some of the established business world's lamest efforts to reach the kids.
You're chatting with your friends. You're talking about the latest music, about the election. All of it is happening in our virtual paper store.
Ryan becomes a cliche in his personal life too.
Hey, Ryan.
Hold on one sec.
Falling prey to all the stereotypical hazards of success, engaging in increasingly obnoxious behavior.
Hey, Pam, it's great to see you.
Developing a drug problem.
Crazy! That's too much for me, man. I'm gonna hit the bathroom.
You've already been several times.
And finally, breaking the law to fake the appearance of a strong performance.
So Ryan, to give the impression of sales, recorded them twice, which is what we refer to in the business as misleading the shareholders. Another good term is fraud.
Soon enough, the evident pressures of the job, coupled with his inexperience, his lack of a support system, and his inability to conduct himself maturely, leads to an inevitable crash.
It's the temp. Look.
Oh my gosh.
The temp.
Is that the police?
Yes.
Ryan's meteoric rise and fall echo those of so many modern alpha bro CEOs who found sudden wealth and fame thanks to their innovations, only to tarnish their brands through their own entitled attitudes, their poor treatment of employees, and their cringe-inducing antics. Like them, Ryan seems incapable of humility. After his downfall, Ryan continues to chase delusions of being a Silicon Valley-style disruptor, and tellingly, he doesn't seem to have any barometer for whether his ideas are even any good.
Origami. It's the sushi of paper.
This idea hasn't gripped me.
What matters to Ryan is the appearance of achievement, the attention it brings him, and the image it creates.
Just imagine that you're at spring break Daytona Beach.
Here we go.
Okay? Everyone's like, hey dude, what's up with all the hotties in the wolf shirts? Or, hey, what's up with that helicopter? It's Rye from Wolf! The problem with having it, or the X Factor, or whatever it is you want to call it, is that it's impossible to put into words what you're bringing to the table.
Although the Ryan of the first few seasons is studious and determined, after he gets fired from his prestige corporate job, something changes. Ryan seems to regress. He moves back in with his parents, he bleaches his hair, and he generally behaves like a jaded, rebellious teenager.
Last night was crazy. Jojo? Yeah. He did a donut in the parking lot in front of a cop.
But even as he stagnates in low-wage, menial jobs,
Happy birthday to Sally in lane 27.
Ryan still wants other people to believe he leads an exciting life. He lies about taking exotic trips.
I never went to Thailand.
Really?
I went to Fort Lauderdale.
Was it nice?
Yeah, it was amazing.
He clings to his past glories.
I was the youngest VP in company history.
More recently, he worked in a bowling alley.
And he behaves as though his career-ending disgrace was all just one crazy adventure.
Even though it was an amazing ride, and I'll give you an example. Anyone see Survivor season 6? Anyone know Joanna on that show? In New York City, I hooked up with a girl who looked exactly like that.
Ryan's constant hunger for other people to think he's cool or interesting is a common plight for a generation that's been raised on social media, where the Instagrammed appearance of happiness is all that matters. Anne Helen Peterson describes this addiction as a means of narrativizing our own lives, what we're telling ourselves our lives are like. And when we don't feel the satisfaction that we've been told we should receive from a good job that's fulfilling, balanced with a personal life that's equally so, the best way to convince yourself you're feeling it is to illustrate it for others.
Smokey's dead.
Smokey the bear?
Smokey Robinson, Pam, he died like an hour ago. I guess I'm the first to know.
Ryan is hopelessly dependent on this performative storytelling.
Okay, I cannot have my phone. I'm sorry. I want to be with my phone.
And even when he's not on his phone, Ryan creates this outward narrative of himself through his clothes, his pretentious affectations.
What are you drinking?
An F train to Brooklyn, extra bitters.
His professed hobbies.
I've always found beauty in uncommon places. Homeless people, graffiti.
And his attempts at being politically woke.
Hey, look, we can't fire someone because we don't like him.
Sorry, this isn't the US government.
What are you referencing?
Everything. Everything.
He feels it's crucial to be seen as provocative, to distance himself from his boring, normal coworkers.
Oh, their breadsticks are like crack.
I love when people say like crack who've obviously never done crack.
Ryan's image-conscious posturing makes him widely hated.
In the warehouse, we'd use code names for people we wanted to talk about. Ryan was douchebag.
Hey, that's not a code name, that's just an insult.
Plus everyone would know who you meant.
Yeah.
Moreover, it doesn't make Ryan himself happy. The gulf between the carefully filtered image Ryan presents to the world and his reality that simply can't measure up contributes to the major problem Peterson's essay associates with millennials: burnout. The Ryan of later seasons stops trying to make anything real of himself, and even seems incapable of focusing long enough to do a day's work.
So to make things simpler for D'Angelo, I just, without lying, strongly implied that I'm Kelly's supervisor.
D'Angelo, Ryan is not my boss, okay? Frankly, he hasn't had a real job here in years.
Other than with his phone, the most meaningful relationship Ryan has is with Kelly Kapoor.
We belong together, Ryan.
And their laughably toxic relationship is a worst-case scenario of the millennial romance.
I'd rather she be alone than with somebody. Is that love?
They're dating in an age where the internet provides limitless choices for partners, which enables young people to postpone commitment indefinitely.
Ryan, do you know when you would want to get married?
Actually, I don't see ever getting married.
Oh.
They're both in love with an idea of love, which largely seems informed by the drama of reality TV.
6 months ago, Karen Filippelli sent me an email, asked me out. I said no because I was committed to our relationship.
Well, I hope you're still committed because I'm pregnant.
Ryan may make grand gestures straight out of a romantic comedy,
We're running off into the sunset.
I finally mastered commitment.
but he's only interested in how Kelly fits into his narrative. It's not about how he actually feels. He doesn't even seem to know how he really feels about her.
Right here, right now, all I can think about is spending the rest of my life with her. Again, that could change.
The third cause we're given for Ryan's awfulness is his upbringing. Occasional clues about Ryan's home life imply he's been coddled.
My mom would say the best stuff, though.
You can do it, Ryan.
And you know that I'm capable of this.
You're the only one who can do it, sweetie.
And although he exudes arrogance, it's clear from how flustered Ryan gets at the first sign of criticism that he's been sheltered from it for most of his life.
What did you think of the presentation?
I thought it was great, sweetie. I would just fix that one
Oh,
part about-
fix means you hate it. I knew it.
This fragility echoes the millennial reputation for being the generation of participation medals, the result of well-intentioned, self-esteem-focused parenting that unfortunately didn't prepare kids to deal with setbacks.
I played full-on in New York. I played at high stakes for keeps. Made it to the top, but look what it cost. Can I tell you what else I learned?
Millennials have become a familiar scapegoat, the villains of the modern office, even though most don't deserve it anywhere as much as Ryan. But the tragedy of Ryan Howard also illustrates how the workplace itself has failed a generation of employees who now, more than ever, need generous expert guidance.
We now have a responsibility to make up the shortfall and to help this amazing, idealistic, fantastic generation build their confidence, learn patience, learn the social skills, find a better balance between life and technology.
Viewed from this perspective, perhaps Ryan is less a villain than a victim of circumstance. An unsympathetic victim, but a victim nonetheless.
I'm betting on myself.
It's a bad bet.
Maybe Ryan could have found the fulfillment he was searching for if he'd only looked up from his phone and learned to find simple joy in the day-to-day, or spent more time building the kind of trusting relationships with his coworkers that would allow him to show more of his true self.
One speck of white remains in waters cold and Kelly green.
But when he describes himself as a child, lost on a light raft.
Ryan can never know.
Maybe everything would have turned out differently if Ryan had had a mentor who properly nurtured his ambition. Instead, he ended up at Dunder Mifflin. And while Ryan didn't become the success that he wanted, he did become a leader in one respect. His story can serve as a cautionary tale for other young workers, and for every office on how to handle the next generation of Ryans that will inevitably come along.
That's The Take. Click here to watch a video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.